Pickleball Diaries presents Cling on the Court with your host, Lily Brown. Let's go!
Hi, Jeff. How are you? Welcome
Hi,
back.
Lily. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming to the Cling on the Court. We're going to cracking some code today.
That's
uh,
right.
I think we'll continue to talk about cracking the code from the serving team. And mostly we will talk about the stacking strategy from the serving team. Do you mind to just help us to understand what is stacking? Why do we need to stacking, or maybe not stacking? What stacking works for what kind of team?
Yeah, stacking. Well, stacking when we're referring to the serving team is generally where you have both players from the serving team lining up on one side of the court, so either the right side or the left side, so that they can position themselves in their preferred spots or the preferred side of the court. So, for instance, let's say that you have one player that you want to be on the right side and one on the left. That right side player, even when they're serving from the left side, you would have them serve from the left side and then quickly move over to the right, and their partner would stay over to the left. So that's sort of what stacking is. It's lining up on the same side of the court rather than the traditional sort of split positioning when you're serving. And this happens just before the serve or during the serve. And the goal really is to try and gain an advantage by positioning yourselves in your preferred positions because you think that you and your partner have certain strengths that you want to utilize from each side, or you might feel that it puts you in a favorable position in the way that it lines you up against your opponents. And it could also be because you want to try to hide certain weaknesses that you or your partner may have. So it can be to gain an advantage and utilize your strengths, but it could also be to try and minimize your weaknesses as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with something simple, but often get so confused is um, the scoring, like especially the scoring during the stacking, where you're supposed to be. I think there is a simple way to remember where you're supposed to be, right, at the baseline.
Yeah, well, the scoring, yeah, regardless of the scoring stays the same, and but stacking, sometimes people do have a challenge remembering where they are based on the score. So generally, if you start on the right side, you start a match on the right side, and the score is even as the scoring team. Whenever the score is even for the serving team, for the serving team score, you should be on the right side. And if the score is odd, you would be on the left side. So yeah, there's different ways to try and remember where to be. So yeah, you have to do a good job keeping track of the score when you're the serving team and you're stacking because you can easily get lost with your positioning.
Yeah. So this is how I remember because I stack with some lefties and I will be on the left. If I step in the mix, I usually on the right. So for me, it is okay, it's even number. We are staying the same as we start. If it's
Yeah,
odd number, I'm always on the other side.
that's exactly it. You put it more simply than I did, and that's just it. If it's an even number, you're where you started the match. If it's odd, you're on the opposite side.
Yeah, sometimes can get a bit confusing, but yeah, but once we get to the rhythm, and I think from the basics 101, okay, we start a stacking. As the server, where do you think the server it's the best core position for the server to serve? And
Well,
where actually the partner should stand?
yeah, so if you're lined up and you're stacked to start the point as the serving team, the main thing you have to consider is that after you serve, if you've lined up on the same side of the court as your partner, you quickly have to serve and get back to your own side, right? So let's say that you're the player who you've agreed that you're going to be the right side player, but you're serving as the right side player, you're serving from the left. After you serve, you have to quickly move over to the right side of the court to get ready to receive the return and possibly hit a third shot, right? So you have to remember that your recovery, you have to recover back behind the baseline, but now you also have to worry about your lateral position. So your recovery is also, there's more distance laterally to get back into your position. And so that when you consider that, like, let's say that as the serving team, you want to execute a wide serve. So from whether you're serving from the right or the left, if you want to execute a strong wide serve, generally it's best to position yourself wider on your own side of the court to get more of a sharp angle or sharp diagonal to execute that wide serve. The challenge is when you do that with stacking, if you position yourself further wide and you're stacking, you have a really long distance to recover into your part of the court to get into your proper position. And knowing that you may not position yourself really wide to hit those wide serves because you have a longer recovery. So most people will generally position themselves a little closer to the middle of the court when they're serving and stacking. But that might minimize your ability to be a threat with your wide serve. So those are some considerations with positioning when you're the serving team.
Yeah. So especially when you serve, both players move to their respective position. And when you get the return in the middle, so who take that third shot?
Well, really, so from our last episode, we talked about cracking the code as the serving team and how
Yeah.
communication is really important before a match even begins. Communication is really important so that you can discuss who's going to take the balls that come around the middle of the court. And that the same rationale applies when you're stacking. So I wouldn't say nothing really changes in terms of how you handle the third shot. You still need to come up with guidelines about who's going to take the majority of the balls around the middle and why. The only challenge is that you sometimes have more of a recovery after the serve has been executed. You have a little bit more of a recovery to get into your proper position to receive the return. But once you're in that defined position, who takes the balls in the middle? The logic is just the same as we talked about last week as the serving team, even if you're not stacking. So you just have to predetermine who's going to take most of those middle balls, and then determine how you want to communicate that and make sure you define sort of the rough area that each player is going to be responsible when receiving a ball up the middle.
Yeah. So, like even nowadays, I see more and more rec players. They're doing stacking, even in rec game, and in tournaments, definitely you see more stacking. Even at the competition of 3.5 mixed level, we start seeing more stacking from the players. So, with that, like, would you like to talk about what kind of teams, what kind of formation can benefit mostly from stacking? And also, it's like back to the tournament, and especially in a mixed 3-5, the guy feel like, okay, we're doing mixed game, we have to stack.
Yeah.
But do you think at that level, stacking benefit, like regardless, like to all the mixed team? So I think that will be some conception, like it will be good to talk about before people even start stacking.
Yeah, well, again, it all depends on your reasons for stacking, right? So whether you're talking about the highest level of play or more like intermediate, like you said, like the 3-5 level of play, you have to be clear about why you might consider stacking. So usually it's because someone on your partnership has certain skills or certain strengths that are better on one side of the court. And usually it's the left side. Like, if you have two right-handed players, usually the person with the stronger forehand or maybe the stronger backhand dinking skills will play the left side. Because it tends to be that most people, if they have a weakness when they're dinking, it tends to be on the backhand side, just
Yeah.
generally speaking. So you might position the player with a better backhand dink on that side of the court. Or if you have someone who has a really good forehand attack from the middle, so maybe forehand attack ground stroke, so driving their third shot, so they have a really dominant third shot drive that can create opportunities, or maybe they have a great forehand speed up off the bounce, or maybe they're just really good with their forehand in the middle out of the air from the kitchen. So it all depends on why you're stacking. So stacking can be really beneficial as long as you know why you're doing it. And it could be also to hide weaknesses. So maybe both players, are sort of equally skilled for the most part, and they don't have any, like one particular player doesn't have any obvious strengths, but you might have one player who has a weakness. And again, that could be the backhand dink, right? Or maybe you have someone who's a little less mobile. So sometimes dinking on your backhand at the kitchen can be challenging if you don't have good footwork. Whereas on the right side, even if you don't have the best footwork, when you're receiving more dinks on your forehand on the cross court, most people can be a little bit more, they can adapt and be more resourceful off their forehand, even if they don't have the best footwork or the best setup for the dink. So there's different reasons why you might do it. And you mentioned one specific instance of like sort of intermediate mixed tournament play. You often see that people are stacking to put the male player on the left. But, again, just because there's a male and female partnership doesn't mean you should stack, because it really depends on the strengths and weaknesses of those two players. And often in tournament play, the male and female are fairly equally skilled. And if there's no obvious reason to stack, you shouldn't do it just because that's what you see on TV with the male players playing the left side. You should be doing it because there's an obvious benefit to it. And you might have a male player who's maybe not doesn't have any particular offensive weapons, or maybe they're not that mobile. We often see some of those players, like male players, taking up a lot of space and trying to come over and take balls from their female partners part of the court on the right side. But that shouldn't be happening unless they actually have the skills to do that and do it well. We actually see a lot of times the left side male player overextending themselves and either making more errors or more pop-ups, or getting exposed and getting out of position because they're coming over too much and they don't have the skills to A, get there and make a good shot, but also B, get back to their original court position. So yeah, that's a long answer, but you should be stacking. You should have really obvious reasons why stacking might benefit you as a team. And if you can't find good reasons to do it, you probably shouldn't, because it's just going to complicate things. And if there's no benefit to doing it, it might not work well for you, and it might backfire.
Yeah, you just inspired me, and I think we should dedicate one episode talk about why is all the male, why is all the guys' fault in mixed game, what they should be doing and not doing,
Yeah, because
and
well,
in different
again,
levels of play, right?
that's it. Like on TV, when you see it, like when we're looking at the highest level of play, the most of the males in general tend to be physically larger than their female partners, generally speaking. And those at the pro level, those left side male players have the skills to cover court exceptionally well. So they can get to a lot of balls, but they can also recover really well. But at the more intermediate level of play, that's not always the case. So, the left side male player should not be taking up too much court from their female partner unless it's really benefiting the team. So unless they have a dominant forehand that they can really do things with, or unless the female happens to have a really weak backhand, so balls that come to the female player's backhand on the right side, maybe the male player comes over and takes those. But again, it has to make sense. So yeah, those are all things you have to consider when deciding whether to stack or not.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So back to what you just talked about, the benefit of stacking. Like, so when you and your partner decide to stack, I think at that time you already have the recognition, common recognition is the reason why we stack, because the player on the left is stronger with forehand. So with that, and when the ball coming, so we probably will say, rather than more the angles, and if the left side player can take with forehand, we'll probably utilize the left side player's forehand more. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. If the left side player has a stronger forehand, or if one of the players has a stronger forehand, it makes sense to put them on the left side as long as their backhand's also not a weakness when they're at the kitchen.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they have a stronger forehand, putting them on the left side makes a lot of sense because they can take a lot of third shots around the middle of the court where, assuming we're talking about their forehand is stronger for driving the ball or attacking, or maybe it's just really much more consistent, or maybe they have a good topspin roll third shot with their forehand. So all of those would be good reasons to put that player on the left side where they can try to take more balls around the middle, and be more dominant with their forehand. And you can dominate with like speed and aggression where you're trying to speed up the ball and create pop-ups or create opportunities and get into firefights by speeding up with the forehand off the bounce, or forehand flicks out of the air and then looking to finish it on the next shot. But also if their forehand's just really steady, they can also come over and take more space at the kitchen line and relieve some pressure from the right side player's backhand at the kitchen. So yeah, those would be good reasons to put that player on the left side.
So with that kind of like the key purpose, utilize the left side player's forehand more, what will be the nuance on the court positions for both players?
Yeah, the nuance would be, I guess, starting from the serve, like when you're receiving the return of serve, is really defining the space or the amount of court that that left side player is going to take when the return comes back anywhere around the middle. So
Mm-hmm.
sort of having a visual guideline for you and your partner of how far over that left side player might go to take their forehand on the third shot. And then once you get to the kitchen, let's say the third shot's been hit and you do work your way up to the kitchen, you also want to have defined some space and some guidelines so that the right side player sort of has an idea of how far over that left side player is going to come. And those are things you need to discuss, right? And so that that right side player, if that left side player is going to come over and take a lot of space, that right side player has to be really good at sort of backing up and giving room to the left side player and then quickly recovering back after the left side player takes the ball. And it's hard as the right side player because you've got to be ready for, sometimes you might expect the left side player to come over and take some of those balls and then they don't occasionally. So you've got a tough role in the sense of you've got to be ready to give space, but at the same time, if your partner doesn't come all the way over for a ball you expect them to, you have to be ready to maybe play a backhand dink, for instance. So yeah, you really have to define visually on the court with your partner the amount of space that left side player is going to take for anything that's around the middle or slightly to the right side player's part of the court.
Yeah. So from what you said, is that the right side player should always be ready as the backup. Like we'll have some preconception, okay, my left side partner will take it, but I'm always ready. If he or she doesn't come, I would take that shot.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, they should be ready to play the ball because there's going to be these gray areas all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout a match, there's going to be these balls that are on the borderline of, maybe the space that you and your partner defined that the left side player would take. And sometimes those gray area ones, there can be confusion. So the right side player, they might be curling off to give space to the left side player, but then maybe at the last second, they recognize the left side player is actually not taking the ball that's coming over to the right side. So the right side player has to be curling off, but still ready to make a play on the ball. because there's always going to be those gray areas. Like I said, not everything's obvious, and it depends on where the ball's being sent from the opposing team. Sometimes the ball's coming at different angles that make it a little bit harder for both players to decide who should take the ball. So as the right side player, like you have a tough job as the right side player because you're sort of expected to give space in these scenarios, but then occasionally the left side player doesn't come over far enough, and you're also expected to be ready to make a backhand dink from the right side. So yeah, the right side player should always be ready. They should be curling off if they think that's appropriate and giving space, but at the same time, really be watching in case they do need to play the ball at the last moment.
Yeah, that's actually lead to my very next question. So what do you see the common miscommunication like are?
Yeah, that's it. Like that's the main one with stacking is
Yeah,
once you get to the kitchen, because from the baseline, it's not as challenging from the baseline because once the serve is struck, both players split off and kind of recover to their appropriate standard positions after the serve is sent.
yeah,
That part's pretty easy. It's once you get to the kitchen, the balls are coming from different directions and from different players on the other side of the court. And so probably the most common challenge is at the kitchen, for who's taking what balls when they're slightly out of the middle and slightly more to the right side player's side. That's where the miscommunications can happen. Either miscommunication or, sometimes the left side player is just really inconsistent with which balls they take. So maybe for a few points in a row, the left side player is coming over and taking a ton of space. And then all of a sudden they're not doing that on a specific ball that the right side player thought they would. So those are the most common challenges. And that's why you need to talk about these things before the game starts and actually go on the court and sort of with your paddle, just sort of talk about and point out the amount of space and the zones that each player is going to be responsible for.
yeah,
And then after that, again, the communication's super critical, like we talked about last week. As the serving team, you need to talk when you're at the kitchen. Like that left side player, as soon as they know they're going to encroach a little bit more on the right side player's territory, they should be calling it out right away, like mine, and then they go over and take it. Or if there's a ball that they think is too far away that they maybe would have taken previously, they should say yours again as soon as possible so that the right side player can be ready to play the ball with their backhand.
yeah. So yeah, you don't know how many times my head almost be smashed by a paddle
Yeah, it's yeah, again,
from
yeah,
my partner.
yeah, yeah, you're right. On high balls, like medium speed floaters that are high above the net, sometimes that left side player gets really aggressive and goes really far over. Like those are all scenarios you need to talk about before the game starts so that you can be consistent and execute effective shots, but B, avoid any safety concerns.
Yeah. So often on TV, we heard the commentator will say, "Oh, she's a right side specialist," or he is the left side specialist. And how can you give us some examples? How would you describe as a right side specialist and a left side specialist?
Yeah, so well, it's changing a bit now because the game is um, getting faster. So it used to be typically that the right side, if you were considered to be a right side specialist, you were usually viewed as someone who is really, really consistent and didn't make a lot of unforced errors and were really good at keeping the point neutral. So you're good at just like at dead dinking and not giving a lot of opportunities to the other team, and maybe you're generally considered not to be as offensive. And the reason for that is like usually it's because their backhand's in the middle of the court. So most people, generally speaking, have a challenging time being offensive, speeding balls up at the kitchen off the bounce with their backhand. So you would typically put that, say, consider that right side player to be the really steady player who might not be an offensive threat, but doesn't make a lot of unforced errors. And then the left side specialist, typically that's been considered to be someone who's probably pretty athletic, so they can cover space well, and they usually have a strong forehand from the middle and a pretty good backhand dink. And in today's game at the pro level, if we're talking about left side specialists, they've all developed usually really effective two-handed topspin roll dinks that can really pressure the opposing team because they can send the ball with a bit more speed and get it to dip down and bounce off the court with a little more speed, making it harder to receive. So usually, if we're talking about a left side specialist, we're talking about someone who's pretty athletic, has really either consistent and sort of more aggressive backhand dinks, and is quite dominant with their forehand from the middle of the court.
Hmm. So I think we covered from the baseline. And what do you think about the transition zone? Is there anything special for the stacking at the transition zone?
I would say not really, because assuming when you think about it, when you're stacking as the serving team, as soon as the ball is struck and the serve has sent and it's on its way to the returning team, the two players from the serving team just go to their respective positions. So they recover in the appropriate sort of standard positions, which would be behind the baseline and sort of in the middle of their half of the court, roughly. And then once you receive the return and someone's executing a third shot for the serving team, after that, the same principles apply as when you're not stacking, because at this point, you're just reading the quality of the third shot
Yeah.
and you're hopefully positioning yourself. Your up and back positioning is based mainly on the effectiveness of the third shot. So if it was a drive, for instance, was the third shot drive low or dipping? And does it look like it might create an opportunity? Well, then you're going to both close in a little tighter to the non-volley zone because you're expecting a weaker return volley from the returning team. Or if it's a third shot drop and the third shot drop is effective, you're going to close tight to the non-volley zone. The only difference in say mixed when you're stacking and or actually not even mixed, if the left side player truly is the stronger player, when they're transitioning forward, they may transition up, but a little bit more towards the middle to impose themselves and take up more space around the middle and if something weak comes around the middle, they can sort of dictate with a more aggressive shot.
Yeah. So with that, now we move towards the kitchen.
Yeah.
With stacking, do you see any different with the thinking pattern for the stacking team? Like which of course, on the premises, you think the left side forehand is stronger. So how much, say, if I'm on the right, my partner on the left, the cross court thinking is to my left foot. So who should take that one? And how much the left side player should come and take a dink from the right side?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, we kind of touched on it earlier, but those are things you have to discuss with your partner before a game starts, is like how far over does the left side player to come how far over does the left side player need to come so that the right side player doesn't have to hit too many awkward backhands. So you have to discuss that in advance because yeah, the right side player may have to hit some backhands from the right side. And how, like, where that zone and territory is, it really depends on you and your partner's communication before the match started, so that you know what to expect and how many of those shots you can expect to take as the right side player.
Yeah. So, and does that also matter to the retrieve the lob strategy? Would there be any difference for the stacking?
Well, again, if you're stacking because the left side player is stronger, it could also be that that left side player, in theory, might be the more athletic player. So maybe when the lob goes up, there's sort of like a little bit more of an understanding that the left side player will take more or retrieve more of those lobs. So trying to get in position to hit an overhead, or if the lob's really, really good, the left side player might be retrieving the lob off the bounce and then playing back either a lob or a drop or some sort of defensive shot to try and get back into the point. But yeah, the left side player will cover more of the lobs anyways, because if they're right-handed at least, they're
Yeah.
going to be able to play their overhead from around the center of the court or even over on the right-hand side of the court. They can take their overhead more comfortably. So usually the left side player takes more of the lobs anyways.
Yeah, that's great. That's how I feel when I play mixed game. When we're stacking, I always tell my male partner, like all lobs are yours because I'm so sure they're just gonna constantly lob at me. And
Yeah.
then like the guy, I just said like they're not gonna lob at you because you're usually taller and like you're usually should be good at smash. But if they constantly lob at me, the male player not opposing showing some threat, and our opponent just gonna keep lobbing me all day long.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you could have a left side player who has a great forehand and is a dominant player, but they might not have a good overhead. So sometimes that can be problematic. But yeah, again, it's these are all sort of there's all situational considerations
Yeah,
that a team should communicate about because every partnership is different and everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. So you do need to talk about who's going to cover lobs in certain
yeah,
situations because
yeah,
there are a lot of players that are really good at ground strokes, serving, volleying, but there are a lot of players out there that don't have strong overheads. Because if you haven't played a sport like tennis or maybe even volleyball where you're serving above your shoulder or above your head, um, or if you haven't done a lot of throwing sports, sometimes people can be really strong in all areas except the overhead because they just haven't experienced doing things above their head very much. So, anyways, yeah, those are things you need to talk about with your partner before the game starts.
yeah. Thank you. Wow, I cannot believe we're running out of time again.
Mhm.
I have more topics I want to ask you, and so let's continue in the next episode. And I have some very um, sharp questions and coming from the real game.
Okay,
I
sounds
hope
great.
Coach Jeff can sort it out for us in the next episode. And thank you, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, sounds good, Lily. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you.